People always say, that's a really interesting thumbnail. I'm going to watch these idiots.
I think they just say the part about the idiots.
Welcome into another D3 Datacast. This is our show for week 3, and everyone at this point is playing. So we're rolling. We can say that Division 3 basketball season is rolling. We're not waiting for anyone else to play. I'm Zach Snyder, joined by Matt Snyder. How you doing, Matt? How you feeling? Are you still drinking from that fire hose? Or do you feel like we're kind of settling into a season here?
I think we're going to get into this a bunch for this episode, but it feels like every time I see a new result or watch a new game for Division 3 basketball, I feel like I kind of question everything I knew. So it's you learn new information, you're like that's interesting, but then it also affects everything else you thought you knew. As a top 25 voter, I think in context of kind of what does this mean for my ballot all the time, and this I was hoping that there was going to be a new ballot this week, but I'm now glad that it's not going to be until next week because we're going to look at mine a little bit later in the show. And I feel like it's kind of a mess. Either I'm like not reacting at all to wins and losses, or I'm trying to move teams too far to what was maybe a reasonable loss or a close game that was still a win, right? So I don't know anything about Division 3 basketball. I don't know why anyone is watching the show, but we thank you so much for watching the show. Hit the subscribe button below, follow us, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that good stuff. But it's just fun to watch D3 basketball. It's fun to talk about it and try to make sense of it on a weekly basis here with you, Zach.
This is an interesting time of the year every season because it feels like there's that tension between, like you mentioned, being glad you don't have to actually put together another ballot, but at the same time feeling like we shouldn't be relying on a preseason top 25 anymore. Lots to talk about there. We'll be getting into that throughout the show. But let's move right into our newest segment here on this season of the D3 Datacast, the 4-point play, where we look around the country using the 4 points of the compass to just talk about the things that have been catching our eye or have been on our mind over the last week in Division 3 basketball. So Matt, let's kick off here at looking at, what are you looking at? What are you thinking in the North?
Yeah, I'm going to break the cone of silence that we've had on the CNE, the Conference of New England. Endicott was a team that I'd liked going into the season. I think we've talked about them on a couple of different episodes. They've been fantastic now. 4-0 on the season, a 26-point win over Baruch, a 9-point win over MIT, and then on Sunday they hosted Tufts. They get a 3-point win over Tufts, who's like a preseason top 5 team. Really great start for Endicott. But Zach, I don't think they're the only team in the CNE that's off to a great start. Western New England is also out and running. They're 3-0. They've beaten Springfield. They've beaten Brandeis. They've beaten Keene State. That's a lot of wins over brand name programs for the CNE. Now, it's early in the season. We don't know who anyone is exactly, but kind of no matter how you draw things up, those are wins that are not going to look bad. Um, I think I just basically rattled off 7 wins for these two teams against really good programs. Western New England was a Sweet 16 team last year. That's not really a surprise. I feel like every year we get to the second weekend, there's a CNE team that's in the mix. They don't, in my estimation, they don't get talked about a lot nationally until we get to that point of the year. Like if there's two people out there who want to start a podcast and talk about Division 3 basketball, like they should probably bring up the CNE on occasion. Maybe a bunch of this is our fault, Zach. I'm bringing them up now. The top of the CNE, I think, is legit. I think they're almost always legit. They can play with anyone in the country. They are playing with and beating anyone in the country. I want to give them more attention. Their programs, there are teams there that, as someone in the Midwest, kind of just seem like teams out in like random teams out in the Northeast. As we've done this podcast year over year, we've gotten to know a lot more of these programs on a deeper level than maybe we knew in years before we did a D3 show. And it's teams like this in the CNE that I feel like I'm becoming more familiar with and more interested in following, watching their games, watching their streams, talking about it on the show. Top of the CNE is pretty good. Let's talk about them. Also, like Suffolk's out there 3-0. They haven't played a bunch of good teams like the others have yet, but teams to watch. Hartford's beaten Worcester. Like that's a program from the Midwest that was strong. Maybe that's a bigger name right now than quality. Worcester, I think they're 0-2 to start the year, but still a good program. Hartford's got that win. CNE's pretty good. The top of the CNE can play with anyone. They have played with anyone. They have beaten anyone already in this season. So Zach, you and I, we're going to start talking about the CNE with more regularity starting today on this 4-point play.
Yeah, we've been putting some respect on the GNAC name. we got to start doing the same for the CNE. You're right. It seems like it's always the end of the year where we're talking a little bit of CNE because someone's making a run and it feels like a little bit of a dark horse, or the CNE tournament just has some craziness and you've got like an 8 seed playing a whatever seed for the championship, right? So it's nice to get them some love here early in the season, and good to see some programs that look like they're going to be earning that talk throughout the season. All right, for me, Matt, in the North, I'm looking kind of the other side of the country, but still North. You broke some news in this segment last week. You let us all know that the WIAC is a pretty good basketball league. Who knew? And Matt, you know, obviously tongue in cheek there, but that analysis looks even better this week after Oshkosh's performance, I thought, at the Jack Sikma Hall of Fame Invitational, hosted at Illinois Wesleyan. You know, I think we even talked about it. We may not have known quite what to make of Oshkosh's season opening win against St. John's just because of just the massive level of roster turnover that St. John's was. We didn't really know what to make of St. John's. So how do you make, what do you make of a first game against them? But I don't think there's any doubt that the Oshkosh Titans are very good after knocking off number 21 Maryville and then playing a really competitive game against the host Illinois Wesleyan Titans. Um, Oshkosh is off to a nice start, and I think that the outlook for them looks even better. They're playing a new style. You would think that as the season goes on, they get used to playing that new style a little bit more. And then from the personnel side, they were without Michael Metcalf Grassman the second half of last year. This is a program I feel like has been really bitten by the injury bug the last couple of years. Metcalf Grassman went out last year. He hasn't returned from injury yet, but I'm led to believe that that return is in the near future, right? So that's a really good player that they're going to be getting back, and they're already doing really good things. If that, I tell you what, I tweeted this. If that is really the fifth best team in the WIAC, as they were voted in the coaches preseason poll, look out because we joke about breaking news that the WIAC's a good league. It's a great league, but it may be even deeper than we thought if Oshkosh is indeed the fifth best. I'll tell you what, I don't think they actually are the fifth best. I think they're better than that.
Yeah,
But
probably.
that's where the coaches put them in the preseason poll.
Yeah, they could be the second best team. They could be the third best team, fourth, fifth. I mean, there's still a bunch of good teams in the WAC. Every year there are. I think right now the consensus is UW Lacrosse looks like the best team there. That's who everyone's voting high. But Platteville, I think despite a close loss to Co this week, I think they still look like they're kind of in that top 25 mix. UW Oshkosh has performed that way as well. Someone like UW Eau Claire could be in the mix, I think, as well. That's one of the things, the hallmarks of a deep league, something we talk about all the time on this show, is it's not just how good are the best teams, but it's also like how good is your depth. And the WIAC usually goes 4, 5, 6 teams deep that can beat almost anyone, that can play with almost anyone in the country, whether they're top 25 or not themselves. And UW Oshkosh is definitely in that mix. Now, are they in the top 25 mix? That's what we're going to find out, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
Let's go from the north to the south. Lead us off here in the south.
Yeah, Trinity, Texas really intrigued me on Saturday, getting a signature win over number 3 Emory on a neutral court in Chicago. We had a lot of questions about Trinity entering the season. Head coach Jimmy Smith left for a D1 job. Their star player Christian Green followed him. We didn't really know what to make of Trinity. They moved conferences, right? We're going to have to see how that shakes things up later on in the season. But right off the bat, kind of, they're off and running under Coach Rock. They had beaten Mary Hardin Baylor. Now they got this big win over Emory. Unfortunately, as we record here on Sunday night, Chicago is throwing a wrench into my south point of my 4-point play here, and they look like they are going to run away from Trinity here. So that's the other side of the coin. But I'm sure they would take the 1-1 out of this weekend, going up to Chicago, playing Chicago and Emory. If you told them you're going to win one and you're going to lose one, and the game you win is going to be by double digits, I think they would take that, even despite what looks like it's probably going to be a double-digit loss here. I think that bodes well for Trinity this year and beyond as they move from the SCAC to the SAA. They're a team. We'll have to see where things shake out. We have the first ballot on after through games of November 23rd. But Trinity could they be in that mix? Maybe they could later on the season. Winning a game against what we think Emory could be is certainly big. Has me put my eye on Trinity, Texas. They were a team that I could not, or I didn't vote for in the top 25. Maybe I wouldn't, I'm not sure if I would even right now or not, but they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. It's wins like that against Emory that put them on the map for sure. I mean, they're not really a team that was off the map or off the radar, but big stuff with all the unknowns. I think that's still a program that's going to be very competitive. I think they're going to be in the competitive mix in the SAA for sure. Great stuff. Again, despite the maybe what looks like blowout loss on Sunday, good stuff from Trinity here.
Yeah, I think you're right. An early indication that some of those questions are being answered, Matt. And as I was preparing for this, I was, you know, having some thoughts just about Texas in general. Certainly the Trinity result, but also, St. Thomas going to the Lapata Classic at Wash U. And I feel like they're a team that, the record often looks good, but you're kind of having to rely on, well, this is how they looked against maybe a Trinity or a Mary Hardin Baylor. And because those are the kind of programs that have done a lot of traveling around, and you get some more of like the head-to-head interactions with teams kind of outside the region, maybe a little bit more than St. Thomas historically has, right? So you find out like, okay, how does Mary Hardin Baylor line up with a Trine or an Illinois Wesleyan or something like that? And so then you have to kind of use that and then extrapolate based on Mary Hardin Baylor playing a St. Thomas or something like that. But they go up, they play Whitewater, one of those WIAC schools, maybe not one that's going to be in the top half or expected to be in the top half of that league, but and going up against any WIAC is going to give you some sort of information. It was a slow start for them, but they got the job done. And then in the championship game, they're playing a really competitive game with Wash U. So I thought it was another Texas school that sometimes it feels like we maybe don't know quite what to make of, that I thought acquitted themselves really well this weekend, getting some kind of non-Texas competition.
Yeah.
All right. So that's all just to react to your pick. I've got my own here for the South, Matt. I'm looking at the University of the South. Sewanee hosted number 21 Maryville on Tuesday. It's one of those nights where I feel like Tuesdays just generally aren't very busy nights on the Division III basketball schedule. So I had some time. I was sitting down. That's one that I clicked on, and um, you know, uh, really good performance by both teams. Really, some incredible individual performances leading both sides in the win. Maryville was led by Jackson Garner, who went 8 for 13 from beyond the arc, finished with 32 points. And then he had his running mate on the night. Jamal Ware was similarly spectacular, going 5 for 7 from deep for 22 points. It's a long night for a lot of opponents when you're facing a team that has two guys going offensively like that. But, Sewanee had a guy with a big night of their own. Fletcher Bigham, he was really a stat sheet stuffer. 35 points, 20 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 blocks, 4 steals. It was a really good game. And like I said, being a kind of a quieter night, it's maybe one that could have gotten lost in the shuffle, but just having fewer choices, clicking that on, it was really treated to a really entertaining overtime game that Maryville ultimately pulled out.
Yeah, and we're going to see Trinity. We're going to be able to see Maryville up close and in person coming up. So always enjoy looking forward to seeing the teams that I've seen on stream in person, because things can look so differently when you're up close and watching those teams. So will be interesting to see how they compare with the live eye test versus the stream eye test.
Let's head west. What do you got for us there, Matt?
Yeah, something we actually did not mention during last week's show. I think we often like to talk about this game in particular, but Grinnell hosted Greenville this past week. Two system-type teams playing. I think this is going to end up being probably the highest-scoring Division III basketball game of the season. Definitely the highest-scoring regulation game. Grinnell wins this game 161 to 130. If you're not familiar, both Grinnell and Greenville play a fast-paced pressure, get quick shots, try to take a lot of shots style, line changes in and out of the game style of game, different takes on that kind of system, quote unquote, basketball approach, but kind of similar in that regard. Grinnell shot 65% of the game, 79% on 2-point attempts. So my guess is that they were effective at breaking that Greenville press, getting the ball all the way to the rim and laying it in. That's how you shoot almost 80% on your 2-point attempts. There's been a lot of seasons, I think, in the past where Greenville and or Grinnell have seemed like a sideshow, just like this is an interesting, sideshow. That's the way to put it, right? Of D3 basketball, not serious teams at times. I think at least this year, Grinnell, the last few years as well, they've been a legitimate contender in the Midwest Conference. I think they will be again. They're not going to play a team like Greenville, of course, every time down the court. So they're going to play more traditional type teams. But I think Grinnell, when they play, they shoot this well. They shot well from three as well in this game. When they play, this is the way the system is designed to be played. Really effective, and they really took it to Greenville. A really entertaining score. 291 total points being played or being scored in this one. I'm not sure. I think Greenville maybe is always kind of in the mix in the SLIAC. I'm not sure how they'll be nationally. I think of the two, maybe Grinnell's the one that could maybe make some noise in an NCAA tournament, let's say. So we'll have to see what's in store for them. Like I said, definitely in the Midwest Conference race. But always interesting when Greenville and Grinnell take the floor. It's always like, what's the over-under going to be, and are they going to break it? I think our computer said like 259-ish points overall, and they went well over that.
And Grinnell had some fun on social media after the game, noting that they are the system, the capital
The
THE,
system, yes. The definite
the
article
system.
was noted there.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
right, yeah. All right, I'm looking west to the western suburbs of Chicago, where Elmhurst hosted Hope on Wednesday night in a really competitive, balanced game won by the Blue Jays 71-66. Matt, 9 out of 10 starters finished in double figures, with all nine being between 10 and 19, right? It's a good thing that they had so much balanced scoring from their starters, because neither bench did much, with scoring totals from the bench of just 10 from the Hope reserves and just 7 from Elmhurst. And while that kind of balance might not really lead to individuals jumping out in the box score, watching the game, I thought Elmhurst freshman guard Luke Smith, really jumped out down the stretch twice in the last 2 minutes. Smith hit buckets that extended what was then a 1 point lead, including a 3 pointer with just over a minute left. He went 3 for 4 from the free throw line after that to help close the game out, giving him 9 of his 14 points there in the last 2 minutes. That 3 pointer especially may not have been one that was exactly a dagger, given there was still time left. It was just a 4 point lead, but it was definitely one where you got to sit back and just note that that was a huge shot in that moment. And I tell you what, for a guy making his college basketball debut, it was a heck of a final 2 minutes to close out a big win.
You mentioned Hope going to the Western Suburbs on Tuesday. On Saturday, the Western Suburbs came to Hope, and Marcus Werman hit a big three buzzer beater to give Hope the victory in that game. So the CCIW taketh, and the CCIW giveth away, maybe, let's say. But a couple of tightly contested games for Hope against CCIW teams there this past week.
Yeah, yes, it was. All right, one more point on our compass here. Let's go to the East.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about York, Pennsylvania, and Hood at the top of the MAC Commonwealth. York is 4-0. They've got wins over Hobart, Susquehanna, Johns Hopkins. Hood entered Sunday with a 3-0 record. They had a really big number win against Ramapo, and an overtime win over Catholic. I think maybe Ramapo's down this year, but Catholic is a team that's been in my top 25 ballot. They were in the preseason top 25 poll. I think they're a good team. Catholic has gone on to beat Christopher Newport. So I think they're a strong team. Hood is good. Is something we usually talk about almost every November. It seems like they're kind of off the radar. That they have a big result, whether it's like a beating Randolph-Macon or taking them to overtime at least, is kind of what it's been the last few years. Here they beat Catholic. I think that the top of the MAC Commonwealth, we've talked about some other conferences. They're strong as well. York and Hood are teams that I would be looking at for my top 25 ballot if I was submitting one this week. I think they've had impressive starts to the season. Definitely a conference I'm going to be looking at. I got these numbers entering play on Sunday, but I think the MAC Commonwealth was 18-9 overall. That's a really good start. That's the start of a really good recipe to getting your conference multiple teams into the NCAA tournament. We'll have to see where things end up. We're only, 9 days into the season, I think 10. So lots and lots to play, but that's how you get your teams in. You win a bunch of non-conference games, you beat competitive teams, and then your conference has good NPIs at the end of the year, and then you not are just getting only your AQ, but you're getting kind of a Pool C at-large bid as well, maybe two, depending on how good your conference is. And I think the MAC Commonwealth is putting themselves in the position, especially, like I said, York, Pennsylvania, Hood, two teams I'm keeping my eye on. They're firmly on my radar going forward.
Yeah, the MAC Commonwealth was a huge storyline a couple years ago in the tournament. Took a kind of a step back last year, but looks like there's going to be a lot of intrigue there back in that conference again. All right, Matt, in the East, I'm taking a look at that Naz game winner against RIT. Nazareth had a late tie game situation, comes away with a buzzer beater that was all over social media Tuesday night into Wednesday. It was the Sports Center top 10 number one play. So maybe you've already seen it, but if you haven't, we're going to bring it to you here. Solomon McFarland hits the game winner. It was his only basket of the night. It looked like this.
RIT would tie the game in the final seconds. Naz had the ball, and they worked it to Savage for the winning basket. But it would not go. RIT got the rebound, but they lost it out near midcourt, and it went to the Golden Flyers' Solomon McFarland. A game winner for McFarland. His only points of the game, but the game's most important points. Nazareth with a dramatic 56-53 victory.
Yeah, always fun to get a D3 play on SportsCenter like that. Big game winner there. So fun to see. Usually, you get the D1 highlights on ESPN, but every now and then you get a D3 highlight. So fun to see that make the SportsCenter top 10 and be all over social media.
Yeah. And wanted to bring it here and show it. I mean, this is kind of a little bit different than what we've done on this segment before, but kind of an opportunity to bring some of these things. Not everyone's on social media, or especially with carriage disputes, maybe people didn't have the opportunity to see it on SportsCenter. So maybe someone didn't see it. Glad to be able to bring it here. Thanks to the Nazareth Athletics Department for bringing us that one. Okay, Matt, we've talked about how there's going to be another week before there's another top 25 poll. But it's a little give and take. You feel like you'd like to be doing a redo on your ballot, but at the same time, maybe glad to have some more information before you really have to. But I know that you've been kind of thinking through it, working through it, and you've got a little bit of a mock ballot, so to speak. Obviously, things will change before you submit a real ballot for the next time. But why don't you take us through kind of where you are at this point in time, just kind of mock ballot style, since we're not going to have a real poll this week.
Yeah, so on the screen now for the YouTube viewers is my top 25 ballot that, let's just say that I would submit if there was a poll this week. I probably didn't do all of the checking and cross-checking or figuring out, the exact one or two ranking spots that I would have if it was a real poll, but I've put teams like really directionally kind of where they are. I also put the green arrows up for anyone that I kind of moved more than 2 or 3 spots, or the red arrows down if you came down. So kind of staying at 1 and 2, I had Trinity, Connecticut, and Randolph-Macon up there. I would bring UW-La Crosse up a few spots into the number 3 spot is kind of what I'm thinking right now. Carthage into the top 5 at number 4. Redlands, Chicago. I think Chicago did come up a little bit and wash you down a little bit, but kind of in the general vicinity of where I had those teams before. Hampton-Sydney, despite one loss that they had against UW-La Crosse, and a loss that we talked about maybe had a scoring error involved in it, they're a team that was impressive to me, especially opening weekend. I had them more in the late teens. I would have them in and around the top 10, I think, right now. Emory, they had that 10-point loss against Trinity, Texas. Like, is this an overreaction? I think I had them maybe number 3. I think still top 10, though, so like 9. That's kind of what I would maybe be thinking for Emory. Illinois Wesleyan got a win over Illinois College and a win over, we already talked about it, right? UW Oshkosh at the Sigma Invitational. I would maybe move them up. I think I had them kind of late teams. They look like they had some transfers and some new players coming in. Just wasn't completely sure how they would fit. It looks like it's going to be pretty good. So I would maybe move them up into maybe number 10, above some teams that maybe have some losses. We've seen Roanoke get a couple of wins. I would keep kind of Calvin where they were. They did take a loss. Was it a 2-point road loss to Denison? I think Denison's probably going to be pretty good. So I would maybe what we know about the teams kind of hold them steady. Virginia Wesleyan sort of likewise. I would kind of keep them in the same kind of range. Catholic, also a team that has taken a loss but gotten a good win. I would keep them kind of at number 14. Despite 2 losses, Christopher Newport doesn't fall out of my poll. I think I would move them from like the 9 range I had them in, maybe to the 15 range. Not a big deal. Now here we get to a big jumper. Endicott, I'm thinking maybe all the way as high as number 16. They were a team that we talked about in the previous segment. They just beat Tufts on Sunday. They have other good wins. They were a team I thought was potentially good. I didn't think this good, but right now they look really good. I don't know if I would submit them all the way at 16, but that's kind of, I think, the range I would be looking them in. And then right behind them is the team that they beat, Tufts, now starting 0-2. Neither loss is bad, so how much do you react to like two kind of fine-ish losses, but now you're 0-2, so are they like number 17? I was like, do I pull them all the way out? Those are the kind of things I was trying to decide. So I kind of kept Tufts there. Mary Washington, a similar position. Hood should have a green arrow up, I think, because I don't think they were in my preseason ballot. So they should be up. Wesleyan I brought down a little bit. Their loss wasn't really bad. It's like an overtime loss to also a team I have ranked, TCNJ. So I don't know, maybe that was an overreaction. Platteville, despite a close loss. Maryville, despite a close loss. Similar positions. Bringing York, PA in, St. Joseph's, Maine, overtime loss at NYU kind of still kept him in the bottom of the ballot. So these are kind of the teams I'm thinking about in kind of the positions I'm thinking about. Let's call it the ballot I would submit, but I probably would have spent a little bit more time if I actually had to submit. But that's kind of what I have. Zach, I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions about it, but that's where I am right now.
No, I don't have like specific questions, but I think right, it's that question in your mind. Are you overreacting to something, underreacting to something? Are you coming off of something that you should have a little bit more conviction off of? And just, as someone who's thinking about the top 25 without having to vote on it, I've seen some of the losses take place, and I haven't really felt like there's been a lot of red flags there, right? They seem like fairly understandable losses. Like sometimes it's maybe magnified because you're starting off, 1-2 or 0-1 or whatever it might be. But like if this was a loss you took, in like January or December, you might think about it a little bit differently just because it's not like magnified by being one of those very early season results. Like if you think about a final top 25, you're going to have teams, a lot of teams that are going to be, 5, 6, 7 losses. And the thing about that is for that to happen, you have to lose 5, 6, 7 times, right? And so it's a matter of who are those losses against. And Matt, I know that if we go to the next slide, we kind of did a little bit of a roundup for like what are those losses that top 25 teams have suffered.
Actually, before we jump right into that, let me just react a little bit. I think you're absolutely. Those are the questions I get in my mind all the time. Like, okay, what are the losses? Are those good losses? Are those bad losses? We don't know about the team I'm trying to rank, much less their opponent that they maybe won or lost to. So I try to get back to my fundamentals, which is what am I trying to do with my top 25 ballot? I try to get away from the system of like punishments and rewards and building a resume. And if you beat this team, then you have to be ranked here and you have to be ranked below a team if you lost to them. I fall into that trap or that mindset sometimes, but especially at this point in the year, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I want to be doing. I'm trying to look at if these two teams, if number 1 and number 2 played on a neutral court next week, who do I think would win? And then if 2 played 3 on a neutral court next week, who do I think would win? And does that make sense? And sometimes it might be Tufts is 0-2, but do I think that they could beat Mary Washington on a neutral court next week? Yeah, I think they could. So I'm going to rank them above Mary Washington. So I'm trying to get myself back to that. And that's what I'm trying to remember. I don't need to overreact to a loss or two, especially if it's, good and it doesn't really change my perspective of what that team was too much. And the reality is once you get past like 5 or 6 on this ballot, I kind of just want to put like 30 teams at number 15 and not really distinguish between the two of them. But that's I have to remind myself constantly. That's what I'm doing. I'm not just responding to if you lost, you come down, you win, you go up. Otherwise, it's just who are the 5-0 teams, who are the 4-0 teams, who are the 3-1 teams, and that's not interesting. That's not fun. That's just the standings of Division III basketball. And
if you want standings, cool. Look up standings. Right?
Yes,
that's not what an opinion top 25 poll is designed to do.
Yeah. So let's now go to that next page here, and I think we cataloged all of the games in which a ranked team lost to a team that was ranked lower than them or was unranked, right? So Zach, I don't know if you wanted to go through the list here or what.
Yeah, we can go through it for the sake of our audio listeners. We've talked about it already. Trinity beat number 3 Emory. Babson hosted Tufts and got a win over Tufts. Tufts also lost at Endicott. Number 9, Christopher Newport lost at number 22, Catholic. So, a ranked versus ranked, but it was the lower ranked team that won that one. Number 12, Calvin lost their opener at Denison. Number 13, Wesleyan lost an overtime game at number 24, TCNJ. Another ranked versus ranked, but the lower ranked team coming out ahead of that one. Matt, number 18, Platteville lost at Co. Number 21, Maryville lost a neutral court game against Oshkosh, which we talked about earlier. Number 22, Catholic lost at Hood in an overtime game. Number 24, TCNJ. We've talked about one of their wins, but their a loss here at Drew. And then number 25, St. Joseph, Connecticut lost at Mass Dartmouth. And so, yeah, going back to the point was as I was jumping the gun here is none of these really jump out at me as like super worrying losses for a top 25 team, right? I think again, go back to thinking about it in terms of the end of the season where a large percentage of the teams are going to, be ranked and still have 5, 6, 7 losses. And anytime that you would like click on one of those on, d3hoops.com and look at, okay, who are those losses to? I feel like it would be very normal for those losses to be teams like we've seen pull off these, quote unquote upsets so far against top 25 teams.
Yeah, and to add on to that, how many of these games were that the ranked team lost on the road? And like you said, it's
Right.
the name on the other side isn't super worrying either. I think the only team on this list that lost at home, Platteville's game was at home against Co. Trinity, Texas beat Emory on a neutral court, and UW Oshkosh beat Maryville on a neutral court. I think other than that, if I have the locations correct, like Tufts lost twice on the road, Catholic lost at Christopher Newport, Calvin lost at Denison, Wesleyan lost at TCNJ, TCNJ lost at Drew, St. Joseph, Connecticut lost at Mass Dartmouth. It's a lot of road games against other reasonable competition, kind of top 100 or top 50, if not top 50 type competition. I think you're right. A lot of these teams will end up with losses. And what you just don't want to see if you're ranking the higher ranked team is how many of those are going to stack up. Or if you're looking at the unranked team, what are their other comparable results to now get them into the ranking mix? So I think you're right. As we put these together and you looked at, oh no, but like Tufts lost twice. I was thinking, they lost twice. Should I pull them out? But then you start looking at it. They lost at Babson, at Endicott. Tufts might still be really good and lose these games. They lost by 4 and by 3. Like that sometimes happens. Is there only like 1 or 2 double-digit games? It was a 10-point Trinity over Emory. It was a 10-point Catholic over Christopher Newport. I'm just scanning here. Otherwise, it's like a basket or two, especially when you're on the road against another good team. And you're 10 days into the season, it's probably not something we should be overreacting to. We should be saying these are close games. And in the most cases, they were projected to be close cases. Like by our computers, just one game, of course, we know. I think Calvin was a half-point underdog or maybe favorite. I think it was underdog at Denison, and they lost by 2. So it's like that's within a basket of what we kind of thought based on what we knew about the two teams. So we're not going to maybe react to that too much in isolation.
And it's interesting as you pointed out just how heavy that these results were against road teams. And I feel like we get into conference play and it's sort of like, yeah, you go on the road in conference play, things are going to happen. You kind of have a way of maybe excusing or minimizing a road loss there. Whereas you could just as easily, I feel like, do that here. I mean, certainly there's a home court advantage. And as we've said, like, all these losses are against reasonable competition.
Yeah.
So again, it's who knows what the picture ultimately looks like. It's just been in my mind as we've watched some of these early top 25 results come in. It's just like I'm not seeing one that's particularly concerning to me necessarily.
Yep. I think that's
So
right.
I don't think we're necessarily dealing with like a blow up the top 25. Half the teams are wrong, and even if you were pulling out a few, it's maybe not so obvious like what that group is that needs to go in to replace them, right? I think it all goes back to what we feel like has been really developing over the last 2 or 3 years is that there's a group of 40,
Yeah. Right.
50, 60 maybe teams that on any given night could beat each other. And I feel like that's basically all we've really seen in terms of shaking up the top 25 so far in the early part of this season.
Yeah, I was about to throw out the number 40 as well, saying there's probably 40 teams you could consider ranking. And I'd say like, yeah, that makes sense. We might not have them in the same spot, or I might come in or out on a different team rather differently than another voter. But once you get from, let's say, 15 to 35, there's probably really small margins between a bunch of those teams. And what I think might be 19, you might think is 28. And we don't disagree about that team very much at all. And there's that difference. So especially this time of the year, like we said, we don't know anything about any of these teams. We're just trying to piece it together. But you're right. As we look through, like, what are all the top 25 losses? They're all like kind of just shrugs. Like, yeah, that's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. All right, looking forward to next week where we have a real ballot and talk about kind of expectations for that next top 25. But let's talk about the picks, Matt. Let's get into our pick segment.
All right, Zach, our week pick to review. These are the games from last week that happened. Ithaca were 1 point underdogs on the road at Cortland. You had Ithaca, I had Cortland, and it was a big win for Cortland, 19-point win, so I get that point. UW Whitewater looks like they were going to cover this one early. It was a 3.5-point line on a neutral court against St. Thomas, but a huge second half for St. Thomas got them a 8-point victory, and you and I both get the correct point for that one. It was another neutral court game, Maryville versus UW Oshkosh. You went with Maryville 3.5-point favorites, but Oshkosh pulled out a 3-point victory to swing that game into my favor, and I get the point there. A Sunday afternoon thriller, let's say, Zach, was Yeshiva and Mary Washington. That was a 9-point line. We both went with Yeshiva, saying the line was too big. And that was a double overtime game that I think it was actually Mary Washington that won, didn't they? Wasn't that 89-90?
Yeah, we got the
scores flipped, but Yeshiva still covers regardless of that. So Mary Washington, I think Yeshiva had a shot, like almost like a close-in attempt at the buzzer that did not go their way, if I have my story straight. But it was Yeshiva who covered that big line, the 9-point line, and we both get the point. And our game of the week was Randolph-Macon and Christopher Newport. Zach, this was really, really close to our line. It was a 5-point line in favor of Randolph-Macon. You and I thought Christopher Newport would keep it closer than that. They lost by 6. Randolph-Macon just barely covered. Really close to the predicted score as well. And I think you know that.
Because I knew we were picking this game that it was a 5-point computer line. I saw the final margin being 6, and I was like, man. I went and looked at the daily score page, and hot dang if it didn't say 71-66 on that 5-point margin, and it turns out it's 6 at 71-65.
Yeah, so even though the computer was as close to being exactly correct as it could be without being exactly correct, I think. So that one.
Kudos to Randolph-Macon and Christopher Newport for playing to the most likely outcome.
Essentially.
Or playing to median expectation.
Yes. All right, Zach. So you were 2-3 last week. That brings you to 5-5 overall. I was an impressive 4-1 last week to bring me to 8-2, mounting an early lead. Let's go to this week. We've got a lot of people playing along with us on social media and in the comments below. We love to see that. Add up your totals, see how you're doing against us. You're probably beating Zach, so let us know below how you're doing as well. That brings us to the week 3 picks. I usually read the whole thing. Let's just go game by game. We'll pick them as we read them. The first game is Emerson at Tufts. 17-point line. Tufts are big favorites here. They're trying to get off the schneid and win a game. What's your pick? That's a huge line, Zach. What's your pick?
Yeah, I'm led to believe that Emerson has, a higher ceiling than maybe the computer's expecting here. And we talked about, some early disappointing results for Tufts. So with a huge number there, give me Emerson.
All right, Zach, that's probably the safe pick. However, I'm going to go with Tufts here. That's a big line. I'm going to guess that Tufts are pretty mad right now and that maybe they're not going to have a fun couple of days at practice or whatever they have before this game. I think they're going to go into this one wanting to prove themselves, wanting to prove to everyone. They're going to put the hammer down, and they're going to cover this big spread here. And you'll watch this. Next week we'll come in and we'll talk about how this big line was not big enough in favor of Tufts. That's my story anyway. Our second game is Whitworth, 6-point underdogs. They're going out to Minnesota. I believe this game's out in Minnesota. They're playing against Gustavus Adolphus. Zach, your pick.
Yeah, 2 teams that missed out on the tournament a year ago. Gustavus Adolphus in particular was kind of right there at that cut line. It was down to the wire for them. But I just feel like Whitworth has been the more consistent program overall. Gustavus had a really good year last year, but maybe hasn't generally been at that same level. So getting 6 points here feels like I'm really not giving it a lot of thought, and I'm just rolling with Whitworth.
Yeah, Zach, I'm going to give much the same response here and go with Whitworth as well. Just 6 points feels pretty big. This is probably going to be a good game, but I think it's one that Whitworth can win as well. So if you're going to give me 6 points on a game, I think that they might be able to win. I'm just going to take Whitworth. It's going to be close, or they can win it. All right, next up, a game that we're going to have the pleasure to see at the Great Lakes Invitational. It's Trine and Marietta. This is going to be the John Vanderwall Bowl. Of course, the former Marietta coach, now the coach of Trine. Trine are 3-point favorites against Marietta on a neutral court here, being played at Washington and Jefferson.
Yeah, neither side needs any motivation for this one. I'm sure it's going to be an electric atmosphere. Both teams are going to be bringing the juice. So I kind of default just to taking the points here. But yeah, again, given the emotional nature of how I expect this game to go, you could really see it going any way. I think you'd expect it to be kind of a tight battle back and forth. But sometimes these things have a way of getting squirrely and it lead into a big result. But I feel like there's just a little more safety taking the point. So give me Marietta.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be an emotional one, given the nature of a former coach playing against his former program. It's also, it's a big one for us, Zach. It's NPI points for the conference while we're sitting kind of alongside friend of the show, Ryan Whitnable, notable Marietta alum. So, we've got kind of a conflict of interest going on here. I know it's 3 points, but I'm going to go with our MIAA compatriot here, Trine. I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to be able to cover the 3-point computer line. Okay, another game against two currently ranked teams that will occur at that same Great Lakes Invitational on that same day is Carthage versus Mary Washington. Right now, the computer line is 1 in favor of Mary Washington. I think entering play Sunday, this was a pick'em, and then after the Mary Washington overtime game against Yeshiva, this did shift in favor of Carthage. The computer started to like Carthage a little bit more, but Zach, it's not up to the computer; it's up to you. What do you pick here?
Well, let's just be clear. None of this is up to us. So I don't know why you're trying to make us pick games before we show up on site and, have to, see these teams in person and,
True.
I don't know. You're trying to set us up to be enemies walking into the gym. I know you and Carthage already have a little bit of, an issue. Give me Carthage -1.
Zach, I've been rolling with Carthage for a long time. I've got them in the top 10 of my preseason. I've been picking them to win. I think I called them the CCIW favorites this year. That Carthage and I roll deep and long. I mean, this has been a long time kind of love affair between me and Carthage. I'm picking them to cover the one of these two teams. I think they're the team that's been a little bit more impressive. I think they're both undefeated right now, so something's got to give. But right now, Carthage looks great. I think that they are a legitimate national contender. Mary Washington looks good, but I have questions about them. Zach, I don't think you want to stir up any trouble between Carthage and I. These are two really good teams. I just think Carthage happens to look a little better to me right now.
That is true. I know that you had your spicy takes about Carthage early in the season, but you were quicker than most, quicker than some to adjust in your top 25 voting a year ago. So hey, as long as no one's holding any grudges, everything will be fine, right?
Everything's gonna be great. I'm super high on Carthage this year. I think this team is gonna be fantastic.
Right. Honestly, looking forward to seeing all 8 teams in attendance. It's
Yeah.
going to be fantastic. And picking for or against, I'm just glad we get to sit back, and I don't care if I win or lose. I know I'm going to get to see some great teams and some great games.
I think that's right. Yeah. All right, Zach, our D3 Datacast game of the week happens to involve the alma mater of and is on the birthday of friend of the show, Bob Quillman. This is going to be the Nick Roper Bowl. University of Chicago, 1.5-point favorites on the road against Illinois Wesleyan. This is going to be a big game. It's got national implications, 2 ranked teams. What's your pick?
I don't think I'm ever really going to pick against this Illinois Wesleyan team on their home court. So I'm going to roll with the Titans, Matt. It'll be Bob Quillman's birthday. As a good friend of ours, sometimes, behind the scenes, we can become aware of things that other people are not necessarily aware of, right? So we knew that these transfers coming in were going to be big time players, and it appears that they are. So I really like the ceiling for this Illinois Wesleyan team. Obviously, Chicago has some big time results here. I think that the ceiling's very high for them as well. But a great atmosphere there at the Shirk. Another one. There's going to be some emotions in the air. It's going to just be a matter of who can handle it best. And I feel like being at home kind of helps that. Give me the Titans.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo what you said just previously about seeing the great teams and good games. This is a potential game that we could see as a rematch in like the second or third weekend of the tournament this year. These are what I think of these two teams. That being said, I'm going to pick Chicago right now. I think that they have the potential to be. I mean, both these teams have the potential to be really good, but Chicago could be like very fantastic. And so I'm thinking that this is an opportunity for them to go into the Shirk Center, a place in which Nick Roper is very familiar and very comfortable, and they could pull out the win, even though it's a 1.5. It's going to be a close game, 1.5 point line. I think they can get the win. I think they can cover, and that would for sure put Chicago on the map as a national contender and as a UAA contender as well, I think, this year. So that's the picks.
That's the picks. All right, let's finish up with the mailbag. Couple items here that came in over on X. Adam at the Country Bison wants to know, is there a Calvin game I should for sure drive over for? Obviously, the answer is all of them.
Yeah, anyone you want to come to is great. I did pick out a few. I don't know exactly where you're from. You're saying drive over for, so I'm going to pick a Saturday game, assuming that there's at least some amount of drive that you have to take to get there. December 6th is a Saturday. UW Oshkosh comes to Grand Rapids. I think that looks like a potentially really good game. It's two teams that have seen each other a fair bit over the last couple of years. They're probably sick of each other. I can think of like 2 games last year that Oshkosh beat Calvin. I also think of the breakout performance from Jalen Overway his freshman year, where he just bursts onto the Division III scene, scoring like 30-some points, where in Oshkosh was a top 5 team. I don't know what this year's game is going to bring, but that looks like a pretty good game. UW Oshkosh at Calvin on December 6th. A couple of conference game options. When Trine comes to town, it's always been pretty good. That happens on February 14, and then on February 21, Hope comes to town. So if you've never been at a Hope Calvin game, that could be an option to get one. Calvin seats a lot. That game sometimes sells out, but you can usually get tickets for that game, especially if you have any sort of advanced planning. Sometimes day of, there's still like upper level seats available. But 3 games, any game would be great if you want to come to see a Calvin game. Those are 3 that are probably going to be really good if you want to see also a really good game. So Oshkosh, Trine, Hope, 3 recommendations there.
One more from Grinch at Grinchlaw on X. Just wondering, it's obviously very early in the season, but anyone that looks surprisingly better than expected.
Yeah, my first gut reaction was like Endicott. We talked about Endicott. I put them in my kind of mock top 25 ballot. They got the big win over Tufts. They're, I think, 4-0. They look really good. But then I wanted to put some numbers to it. I wanted to cast some data back at Grinch here. So if we looked at maybe a comparison between our preseason computer ratings and who's already changed the most, usually when we look at that sort of thing, it's semi-uninteresting in that it's like, team number 330 is now number 230, and you're like, okay, well, that's not super interesting. But one of the bigger teams in that sort of vein is Albion, actually, a team really close to us, Zach. Number 240 in the preseason with a minus 1.5 projected efficiency margin. They're up at 114 right now, 6.4 efficiency margin to the positive side. I think they're 4-0. Albion looks like they are taking a step forward this year, so they're a team that has maybe moved up earlier. UMass Dartmouth, a team that we mentioned on the upsets slide. I think they beat in St. Joseph, Connecticut. They were preseason number 127. Now they're up at 57. A couple other teams, I didn't get all their rankings and stuff, but Rochester, Washington and Lee, Union, Lancaster Bible, all teams that look like they're playing above their preseason expectation. Lots more teams. I think typically about half the teams play above their preseason expectations, about half play below. But a lot of times right now, teams are pretty similar to where we thought they were going to be. But those are maybe a handful of teams that look like they are outstripping what we thought about them 10 days ago and are starting to play better.
That wraps up this week's mailbag. If you have something for us to address at the end of next week's show, you can hit us up on all of that social media garbage. You can leave a message as a comment on the YouTube episode or on our blog post for this episode on our website. Lots of ways to get a hold of us. there's something you need for us to address, we'd love to do it at the end of next week's show. And with that, one more thank you to our great supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/D3Datacast. Really, Matt, think about this as like NPR or public television, right? Everything we do is out there, and we're supported by viewers like you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the support. If you'd like to join the $3 a month tier or the $5 a month tier, go to patreon.com/D3Datacast. We couldn't do these episodes. We couldn't go and travel to the great tournament like the Great Lakes Invitational and see 8 nationally relevant teams like we will next week. We couldn't travel to the Final Four in Fort Wayne and see kind of the Division III champions be crowned without the support of kind of these viewers. And we also couldn't record these episodes, put the data on d3datacast.com, pay the hosting fees for the website without the support. So thank you very much those who've chosen to do that as well. If you're interested in that, the address is on your screen or the link is in the comments below. Also, we just are so thankful for people who watch these episodes, engage with the content. If you want to hit subscribe on YouTube or give it a thumbs up, that's awesome. Subscribe on your podcast feed of choice, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever. We should be on there. We love talking about Division III basketball, and we're just glad that you've chosen to listen to us yap on about it for like an hour every week.
All right, let's get out of here. Matt, good job, team. We're hitting the road for Washington, Pennsylvania. Be back next week.
Good job, team.